Game stakes at Churchill Downs is our NYRA Bets race of the week. Let's talk about it. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets. Here with the preview of Saturday's Grade 3 Blame Stakes taking place at Churchill Downs. And it's a doozy of a race, a 10-horse field, some really big names, including last year's Kentucky Derby winner, Mystik Dan. But before we get into that, I want to encourage you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs, and so much more. We got a load of coverage for you next week for the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival week. And then, hey, train keeps rolling in terms of getting you ready for Saratoga, Keeneland in the fall, the Breeders' Cup. It's all year round, all day, every day here at NYRA Bets. Additionally, if you have not yet played with NYRA Bets, make sure to sign up this week because it's a great chance to do it. Use the promo code BELMONT25. If you do that, you get up to a $200 deposit match bonus and a free $25 added to your account to bet on any race you would like. So, listen, use that promo code BELMONT25 to sign up on NYRA Bets and get a little bit of extra money even added to your account. Now, let's talk some more about the Blame Stakes. This is a loaded field, 10 horses. The morning line favorite is Post Time, but you have horses like Most Wanted, Banishing, Alexander Helios, Hall of Fame, and Mystik Dan, all in single-digit odds on the morning line. This is a very contentious race. Let's talk about this field a little bit more. And we're going 1.1 miles on the dirt at Churchill Downs. This is, of course, for older horses. And I think where we would need to start is talking about the pace dynamics. And then we'll kind of talk about each of these runners, not maybe each of these runners, but some of these runners individually. From a pace dynamic, what can we expect? Well, I think your eyes from a pace standpoint probably draw to 3 or 4 different horses. I think certainly you look at a horse like Most Wanted for Brad Cox, coming off of a very impressive second-place effort in the Ali Sheba behind Fierceness. We'll talk more about that in a second. You have Banishing for David Jacobson, another very impressive second-place finish last time out in the Churchill Downs Stakes. But then you also have a horse like Alexander Helios that has very good early speed, and a horse like Best Actor for Ed Moser Jr., who also has historically shown very good speed. So those are the 4 horses I think you have to think of as being part of the early pace scenario. The question is who's going to get to the front? I think the 2 most likely are the 2 Alexander Helios and the 7 Most Wanted. I say that because a horse like Banishing, is a horse that was sprinting for a long time and then started going 2 turns, has sprinter speed and can get to the lead if he wants to. But a lot of times you look at Banishing's best races, he's coming from off the pace. Now, last time out in the Churchill Downs Stakes, he came from way back, and that's unlike him, okay? So he's more likely to be sitting 3rd or 4th in this race. But he's a horse that likes to track the pace. He doesn't need to be on the lead, and particularly drawing to the outside of Most Wanted, he's happy to kind of sit that tracking trip off the early leader. I think Alexander Helios, on the other hand, is a horse that because of his inside post position, Irad Ortiz Jr. is going to have to be a little bit more aggressive out of the gate and try to get up there on the lead, because otherwise you really don't want to get crossed over by Most Wanted. Then Alexander Helios is taking kickback. You have Banishing there. So suddenly a horse that really likes to sit first or second. And again, Alexander Helios doesn't need the lead, but he needs to be very forward. And again, I think he also has some questions about distance, though he has won at 1.1 miles against Maiden Special Weight Company a long time back. But nevertheless, you have to be strategic if you're Irad. And I think Irad's probably going to send. Safi Joseph Jr., very hot right now in terms of how he's turning out his runners. You had a horse like Skippy Longstocking and Be Your Best, both win big graded stakes races out at Santa Anita last week. So that's a barn that's firing on all cylinders. Obviously, as White Barrio likely to the Met Mile next week going against Fierceness. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But nevertheless, Alexander Helios, good early speed. Now, Best Actor for Ed Moser Jr., that's a horse that showed a lot of speed when he was in the Brad Cox barn. Didn't show some speed in the race before he went to the bench and the first race back. Showed a little bit of speed last time out. Moser's taking the blinkers off. Sometimes that can perk a horse up a little bit and get him to show a little bit more speed. He also is he's cross-entered in an allowance race that's actually run on Sunday. That's a $175,000 optional claimer, which might as well be its own stakes race. So I think there's a better than likely chance that Best Actor may scratch and go into that allowance race where he's probably got a better chance to win that race, or at least run more competitively in that race. So he could very well scratch. And if he does, Then you have a horse like Alexander Helios go to the lead. You have a horse like Most Wanted, who has shown the ability to rate a little bit. He can sit second. He doesn't necessarily want to be any further back than that, but he can sit second. And then you have Banishing sitting kind of third. And that's going to be your early pace dynamic. A horse like Hall of Fame, I think, is probably going to be sitting behind them in the fourth position. And you have a horse like Post Time that's going to be coming from further back. But here's the thing about, when you look at some of those horses up on the lead, a horse like Hall of Fame, I mean, that's a horse which we'll get to in a second, but I should say, well, let's start with Most Wanted. This is a horse that has 7 career starts, 4 wins, 3 seconds. Now, the last 3 seconds have all come the last 3 times out. Lost to Rattle and Roll in the Clark, going 1 mile and an eighth. Won a going 1 mile and an eighth before that, though, against EJ Won the Cup in the Oklahoma Derby. Then finishes second to Skippy Longstocking in the Challenger. No disrespect there. That's a 9-time graded stakes winner. And then finishes second by a length and a half to Fierceness last time out in the Ali Shiba. Oh, by the way, Fierceness set the mile and a 16th track record at Churchill Downs in that effort. And Most Wanted earned a 105 Beyer speed figure. He's now 3rd race back in the form cycle. This is still a young horse that presumably is still going to have another level potentially to him here. Like I said, 3rd back in the form cycle, has been working out tremendously for Brad Cox. Florent Giroux obviously stays aboard. So it's really interesting to see whether this horse can continue to take a step forward. He's not had that breakthrough victory yet. Now, he already has a grade 3 to his name. Winning another grade 3 probably wouldn't necessarily cement him or anything like that, but it might move him up to that next grade 2, grade 1 entry. Maybe Cox feels confident to be able to do that later this summer with a horse like this in the Whitney and races like that. Now, that's what Most Wanted brings to the table. Like I said, he can rate. That Oklahoma Derby, he sat off the pace a little bit. In his allowance level race, he sat off a little bit. In his maiden special weight race, he sat towards the middle of the field, actually, and came from off the pace. So he can come from off the pace, but he's a horse that does tend to do very good running up on the front end and it's just naturally very fast. So he's got that flexibility. Alexander Helios, like I said, he's one, didn't show the best speed last time out, but I rat aboard. I think he's going to fully send with that horse, particularly given the post position on the inside. It's a horse that won the Razorback 2 back going 1 mile and a 16th, held off a horse like Banishing there at the very end. I still think he's a little distance limited at 1 mile and an eighth, but we'll see. Banishing, I mean, geez, what can you say about this horse? I mean, what's this horse done wrong the last 6-7 times out? The answer is very little. This horse was coming out of claiming races at one point and is now grade 1 placed and nearly won the Churchill Downs Stakes last time out, if not for an incredible effort from Mindframe. This is a horse that can win at 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs, 1 mile, 1 mile and an eighth, 1 mile and a 16th. He can run well at all those distances. He's got great distance versatility. I do think 1 mile and an eighth is his max, as we saw 2 back in that Oklahoma handicap where he got overtaken by First Mission. He got to the lead and then lost it. So I think that going that 1 mile and an eighth is a little bit of a challenge, which is why I don't think Flavian Pratt is going to press too hard on Most Wanted. They don't want to go too fast up front because they know they have to keep something in reserve coming for home. So he knows he's got to have at least moderate fractions, if not honest fractions, going that distance. Like I said, the fact Alexander Helios also has, I think, some distance limitations potentially and is at his max maybe at 9 furlongs means, yes, there might be a few horses up in the lead, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily a nuclear hot pace as a result, because these are all horses that realize, hey, we need to conserve something coming for home if we're going to get this 9 furlong distance. I think Most Wanted is the most likely to get that distance out of that front group. Now, let's talk about a few others, though, because we got to talk about Post Time and we got to talk about Mystik Dan. Post Time is your morning line favorite. We'll start there for trainer Brittany Russell. Always liked this horse. 10 for 16 winning in his career. Has never finished out of the exactas. Earned $1.26 million. Not bad for a Maryland bred that costs $85,000. So this is a horse that's put together a very impressive career. That said, 9 of the 10 wins have taken place in Maryland. The one non-Maryland win was in the Carter back in last April. What happened in that race? That was a 4-horse race, okay? So, where he was the 4-5 favorite. So outside of that, he's not won. He's run incredibly well. He finished second in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. He finished second in the Met Mile. He finished third in the Whitney. He finished third in the Cigar Mile. I mean, this is a horse that doesn't run bad races. But I do think it's fair to question, can he win at Churchill Downs, at Del Mar, at Saratoga, against top-level competition in this big of a field. I think that's a question mark. And in my opinion, he's a horse that I will be playing against in my horizontal wagers. I just think that he is a horse that is super honest. He'd be included in my verticals, my exactas, my trifectas, but he's not a horse I want to play up top because he's the favorite. I'm going to try to get around him. I'm going to try to keep my ticket as skinny as possible for that late pick 5 in this particular leg. I'm not going to use a lot of horses, and post time's one that I'm going to avoid using. Now, he's coming off a 13 1/4 length victory against $55,000 optional claimers at Laurel Park. That was his first race back since the Cigar Mile, which was back in December. So he had a 5-month layoff, 6-month layoff there, 5-month layoff from his previous race. But here's the other thing about post time. He doesn't hold a speed advantage over anybody else in this field. Yes, he's run triple-digit buyers. He ran a 105 in the Whitney, but a lot of his Spire speed figures are 93, 95, 97, 92, 95, 97. Yes, he has the occasional 103, 104. 102, 105, but they're not always consistent, and they come in the midst of other races. So he runs a 93 last time out, and now he's got to take a step up. Not saying he can't, most definitely probably will, but nevertheless, you still have to do it. And you have to do it against a horse like Banishing that's run triple-digit buyers 5 of his last 6, a horse like Most Wanted who's gone 102, 105 the last 2 times out, a horse like Hall of Fame, who I'll get to in a second, 100, 106, 100, 103 the last 4 times out. Even Mystik Dan ran a 101 last time out. Alexander Helios has a 102. So again, post time doesn't have really a speed advantage, and he's going to likely be a deep closer in this race. And this is one of the issues that I've always had with this horse, which is Sheldon Russell, in my opinion, the jockey, rides him like he's at Laurel Park all the time. And when he's at Laurel, he is so much the best. He can afford to have that kind of well off the pace, kind of a late surging ride where you come running late. And I always feel like Sheldon gives this horse maybe a little too much to do when he's facing top-level competition at big-time tracks and big-time races. And he doesn't move him maybe early enough. He doesn't get him positioned into a more forward position or even a mid-pack position early enough. And like I said, he just gives himself too much to do. I'll never forget when he won the Carter, which was, again, a victory, but it was a 4-horse field, and he put the horse in the worst possible spot. He put the horse to the outside of Super Chow coming down the stretch. What do we know about Super Chow? The horse lugs out every single race. So now post time's being forced out further and deeper into the track with every single stride while trying to track down the favorite. He's the 4-5 favorite in a 4-horse field and nearly gets beat. So again, I think that's why I don't always have a ton of confidence in post time in these types of big spots in graded stakes races outside of Maryland, because I just don't know what sort of ride he's going to necessarily get. Obviously, Sheldon knows the horse better than I ever will. But again, I just think from looking at and watching these races, I just wish he was moved a little bit more quickly and a little sooner in the race. And I wish he was sometimes positioned a little bit more mid-pack. So that's post time, and I'm going to be playing against him. Now, Mystik Dan, let's talk about it. 2024 Kentucky Derby winner. Listen, I'm thrilled for the horse because he ran a nice race in Lake Ouachita last time out at Oaklawn Park, because the 3 races before that were not good. The Belmont, he loses by over 15 lengths. The Malibu, he loses by over 11 lengths. And the Pegasus World Cup, he loses by over 20 lengths. That's not great. And you think, man, this horse is going off the deep end. And Kenny McPeak sends him to the bench for a few months from January to May. And he comes back and looks really good. Admittedly, lost to Saudi Crown, but that's a very good horse. And very close contest, lost by a nose, just couldn't quite get there on Saudi Crown, but was very game down the stretch. The 1 1/8, I think he can obviously do it. He won at 1 1/4. So I'm not worried about the distance in that regard. Well, here's what I am worried about with Mystik Dan. He doesn't necessarily back up his big performances with another one. He doesn't stack up wins. He never has in his career. Now, I know he didn't win last time out, but he ran a winning race. He ran a big race. And if you look at his speed figures, he usually has a little bit of a regression after that big of a race. His best 2-race combo was really the Derby and the Preakness. And even in the Preakness, he lost. But he still at least ran a 97 and ran a decent figure. So I think you look at a horse like Mystik Dan, 4-1, relatively short price because he won that Derby. He's going to be bet. And I'm just willing to try to beat him in this spot, not include him in my horizontal wagers. And here's the other thing. And this is nothing more than a factoid. But I love the factoid. I just find it interesting people at Churchill Downs get very upset with me when I mention this factoid. They're very sensitive about it. I don't know why, because it's just reality. And the reality is that it has been 1,225 days on Saturday since a Kentucky Derby winner has won a subsequent race. That's right. It has been 1,225 days on Saturday since a Kentucky Derby winner has won a subsequent race, an official Kentucky Derby winner. And the last Kentucky Derby winner to do so officially was Mandaloun, winning the Louisiana Stakes back in January of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So it has been a while. It has been a minute, as the kids would say, since we have seen a Kentucky Derby winner come back to win. Now, is that an indictment on the Kentucky Derby? Of course it's not. Just last year, we had Forever Young and Sierra Leone and Fierceness in that race. They all went on to do amazing things. This year, I think the streak's going to end pretty quickly. I think Sovereignty is going to win some big races very soon. So, the race is going to be a phenomenal race. It's the, most popular race in our sport. But the reality is the winners of that race the last couple of years have not gone on to have illustrious careers in terms of Rich Strike, in terms of Mage, in terms of Mystik Dan to this point. Mystik Dan could flip the script. Absolutely. I find myself rooting for him, but I'm not going to be rooting for him on Saturday because he's not going to be on my ticket because I think I can beat him, especially at a shorter price. Now, let's talk about a couple of prices that I think you can think about including in your vertical wagers. One of those is Hall of Fame for Steve Asmussen, 8-1 on the morning line. He answered some questions last time out. Do I think he's good enough to win? No. Because I don't know if he can win off Lasix. But at least last time out, he showed he can run well off Lasix. Because that was a huge question. Because his previous 2 attempts against graded stakes companies off Lasix was in the Risen Star and in the Louisiana Derby. And he lost by those 2 races by over 20 combined lengths. So I wasn't necessarily sold on him in that Ali Sheba. He ran a decent third. Wasn't a great race, but it was a solid race. Fierceness and Most Wanted were clearly the best, but he kept on. And I thought he looked pretty good in the grand scheme. So, he ran a 100 buyer speed figure, which was not a huge regression from that 106 he ran in the New Orleans and matched his 100 buyer speed figure he ran when he won the Mine Shaft. Now, remember, all those races, the New Orleans Classic and the Mine Shaft came with Lasix because it's down in Louisiana. The Ali Sheba was off Lasix. Now we're off Lasix again. So, listen, gun runner out of a Giants Causeway Mary should be able to run all day. He was $1.4 million that the Basic tipped in August sales back in 2022. There were always big expectations around this horse. So he has the talent. I just don't know if he's necessarily the same horse off Lasix as he is on Lasix, and I view him more as an underneath play. And an 8-1, you're getting a little bit of value with that type of a horse. However, the horse that I really like underneath is the number 3 Antiquarian at 15-1 for trainer Todd Pletcher, Johnny Velasquez back and forth. I've always liked this horse. He was my pick in the Louisiana Derby, and he made me look like an idiot. But I backed it up, and he was my pick again in the Peter Pan, and he made me look smart. Now, if you go through his running lines, there's not a lot he's done wrong. He loses in debut to Conquest Warrior, who was a very nice horse for Shug McGahee, who won next time out and then ended up in the Florida Derby. He wins his next start, breaks his maiden against a horse like Cornishman, who goes on to break his maiden next time out. Then he goes to the Louisiana Derby and all hell breaks loose. He breaks through the starting gate. He unseats Johnny Velasquez. Then when he does break, he kind of hops a little bit at the start. He's just, mid-pack, which is not where he'd ever been before. And he has to make a little bit of like an earlier move around the turn, go really wide, flattens out in the stretch. Not a great effort. It was an educational effort, I thought. And that's why I thought he was still a good bet in the Peter Pan. He comes back and wins that over the Wine Stewart. Very, very good horse. And then goes to the Belmont. And finishes 5th that day in a 10-horse field. Doesn't embarrass himself. And he loses to Dornoch, who's a multiple-time Grade 1 winner. Mindframe, who's now a Grade 1 winner. And Sierra Leone, who, by the way, won the Breeders' Cup Classic. So he lost to some pretty good horses. And I don't think, like I said, he didn't embarrass himself finishing 5th that day. But nevertheless, Pletcher sends him to the bench. He doesn't run from June until April, so 10 months off. And comes back in a $62,000 optional claimer, going 7 furlongs at Gulfstream Park. That's not his game. But he still showed good speed and was able to win that race pretty easy under Edgar Zayas. Now Velasquez is back aboard. We're stretching back out, which is what this horse is bred to do, sired by Preservationist. And I just think this horse at 15-1 presents outstanding value. He can sit a few different trips. He's going to be behind the early pace. If the others fail to be able to get this distance, he's a horse that can capitalize. On the speed figures, he needs to get faster. I know that. 93 buyer speed figure is his career best, but it came last time out off that long layoff. I think second back from the layoff, you're going to see another big progression from him. I think he is a live long shot to certainly use in your exotics. I don't think he's good enough to win, but I'm using him underneath in my exactas, in my trifectas, and certainly in my supers, because at 15-1, he presents tremendous value relative to how I think he's going to run in this race. So where am I ultimately going in my top selection? I'm going to go with Most Wanted. That's going to be my top pick. My second choice is Banishing. Those are going to be the two horses I use in my horizontal wagers. I'm only using those two. I'm fading Mystik Dan in post time, and I'm also fading Alexander Helios, who I think just has some distance limitations. So I'm going with Most Wanted and Banishing up top. I like Hall of Fame. I like Antiquarian as horses you can mix in underneath in some of your vertical wagers. All right, folks. Well, listen, I hope you enjoyed this preview of the Blame Stakes taking place at Churchill Downs on Saturday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button on NYRA Bets YouTube today. Additionally, make sure to use promo code Belmont25 if you've not yet signed up on NYRA Bets in order to get up to $200 deposit match bonus and a free $25 added to your account. All right, friends. For NYRA Bets, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you it's now post time.